Hey, what's up? A gracious good morning to you, good people. It's your girl KB. You know what I do, and you know why I do it. It is. No, it's Wednesday morning. It's 3:35 in the a.m. and it's July 16th. I am going to limit myself to 2 videos today because I have 2 computer screens right in front of me. I'm in my office, okay? I have 2 computer screens in front of me. One has one load of work, and the other has basically a chore list that I have to do. So, all that being said, I'm behind. And I'm rarely behind because I have so many facets to my job. I try to stay on top of it. But you didn't log on to hear me talk about that. Now, what I am going to talk about is my favorite subject, and that is the character of God, the nature of God, and how we as people measure up. See, I'm not going to beat people up with scripture. That's not me. I can tell you what the book says, but I can also tell you all the things that we learned, and we call them fundamental. I'm by no means a fundamentalist. I need to say that. I am by no means a fundamentalist idea of a Christian. I'm not part of that number. You know the song of When the Saints Go Marching In? Yeah. I want to be in that number, but I am not in the number that fundamentalists identify. Okay, I need to be clear on that. There are going to be some people in the fundamentalist group that are going to tell you, I'm not even a Christian. And based on what I see from that group and what they're allowing, I know this is going to sound harsh, this is going to sound like a judgment. From what I see from that group and what they are allowing and what they are afraid to speak up against, I don't want to be in that number. Let's be clear about that. I'm going to change scripture up a bit in this quote as it relates to what I'm talking about. I revel in my so-called infirmities. And I say so-called because, I don't want to be measured by things that are just unsound and unseemly. I need to put that on there too. Okay, try to wrap this up in a neat little package for you. Let's say, all that being said, it brings me back to, what I started preaching on early on in this inception of video ministry. This process of unlearning, and here's a made-up word by me, the wrongiosity that I held on to for so many years, and calling it scripture. And I think we're at that place where, it's time to be held accountable. For me, it's always that place, but I make myself very unpopular by, I want to say, my definitive sense, of justice and fair play. Because I believe in calling a thing a thing. I'm not going to let you lie to me, or embrace the lies that you've told yourself all these years. Christianity involves more than being a good person. I hear that a lot, but I'm a good person. And I hear, about how people say they have faith, but they fall apart. How people, I want to say, incorporate a whole lot of other stuff into their theology. And I want to say, there's nothing wrong with understanding other things. There's nothing wrong with it. Knowledge is power. And being able to question makes you knowledgeable. There's nothing wrong with that. But the two things that I do find disrespectful is that in monotheology, which is basically Christianity, it's God and God alone, and we're walking around with bits and pieces of things other than, reference points to why it's God and God alone, or why, Christianity works. I'm claiming Christianity, but I know I have a lot of missteps with worldly views, and trying to find a balance between the two is a battle every day. Christianity is about your relationship to the Most High. Notice I emphasize the individuality. It's about your relationship with the Most High. It doesn't make you an expert on sinful practices. It doesn't make you an expert on other people's business, although that influences your thoughts sometimes. Let me pluralize that. Sometimes that does influence your thought, or your actions. Other people's business I'm talking about. But it's about bringing yourself into submission and obedience to the Most High and maintaining that standard. See, most people use Christianity to become experts on other people's sin while extending grace to their own. And, they see sin as, I want to say, a character defect. And on some levels, it is. But how do you reconcile having that sin to being made in God's image? See, I don't hear people asking that question. All I hear is about sin and punitive actions. And sin defined as, I want to say a terminal illness, which it can be. Okay. Notice how I'm phrasing things. It could be, it might be, and that's because I am breaking down the definitives as it relates to me, and my relationship. I can tell you what the book says, and I'll call the Bible the book, and I'm apologizing to the people who feel that's an offense. But again, the word is supposed to be, according to the Bible, living and breathing. The word is inspired by God. So if it's living and breathing and inspired by God, how are you relating to it? See, we can recite it, but do we live it? And it all boils down to, again, the relationship that I have with God. It's like the relationship I have with my friends. When somebody says, you know what, I love you, but you were way out of line. See, a lot of us don't have those kind of people in our lives. See, I want you to hear what Christianity is. Because just in human nature, we're always going to try to find a way to circumvent the rules to, do what we want to do. It's about disobedience. That's what sin is. Sin is about disobedience. Disobedience to who? Disrespect to who? And I know you want me to say God. But you're violating yourself. You get caught sleeping on yourself. Because if you say you believe something and you don't adhere to what you believe, what you're telling me is that you believe in you. You have a love seat. Move over, God. I need you to sit over here. We're way close to the arm. So I can just scooch in here. So we're God's together. I want to sit at your feet and learn at your feet. And, it is my fervent prayer that I am. And again, me being me being honest and accountable to, to the Most High. I know I don't always get it right. I don't walk around saying, I'm fire baptized and saved by the blood. Because when you make that proclamation, you just basically, again, making yourself a God and dismissing anything that you've done. I want to have that ugly cry like Jimmy Swaggart. Now I know a lot of that was showmanship because he got caught. And Lord only knows how long we're engaged in that behavior. But I'm not going to dismiss things either by saying, against thee have I sinned, and forget everybody else that's telling me that I've sinned. When you hear people telling you that you messed up, we need to, pump our brakes and halt our course of thinking. Because those people are the people who love you. The words may be hurtful to hear, but maybe you need to hear them. And how I came to this subject today is I was driving to come to the office. This time of day is when I have my most, I want to say, profound and, see, here's the and, profane thoughts. It's like that cartoon where you got an angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. Who are you going to listen to? But I was driving in, and, I thought about all the sisters who were on this line during Pride Month. That Saturday Night Live skit with Buckwheat when Eddie Murphy was on Saturday Night Live. All these sisters were on TikTok, whooping Penub. That's looking for love, y'all. And I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from people who say, well, my ex was crazy. They did da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Now you're still holding on to some trauma and some pain based on a poor choice for a connection. You have to ask yourself, stop blaming them. What was attractive? What were you looking for? Okay? And how and why did the wheels fall off? Based on you. See, you talk about your ex. You've heard me say this before. but you won't talk about what you did to make them crazy. And I share it, and I continue to share that I no longer talk to a certain individual because we made each other crazy. And when I met my saturation point with the deceit, and yes, there was some deceit. Yeah, I was smothering and overbearing. I can say that about myself. Smothering and overbearing. You know, I was transactional in my presentation. You know, that part. Love bombing, I think it's the term that's used. That was me. Because this individual exposed the present trauma. There was something in me that was attracted to the trauma, my giving and I want to say caregiver nature was attracted to that. Almost like a shark having blood in the water. But when the wheels came off and I had reached my maximum saturation point with the bull pilings, how about that? Because you know what I wanted to say. When I had reached my maximum point of that, and the person ended up being my Judas. Now, all the while they're telling me, you know, this is cool. And then I'm thinking, I can relax. I don't have to be overbearing. They're saying all the right things. My response to all that, my anger was triggered. My pride was hurt. And I wanted to hurt back. And that's all I wanted to do. You know, everything else that I know about me, everything else that I know about my relationship with God, sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, wah. Wah, wah, wah. And I wanted revenge. So again, whenever somebody tells you that their ex was crazy, you have to listen for what the individual did to make them crazy. And if they don't tell it in the same story, you need to start asking questions.